call this meeting to order at 7:45 and ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're all here except for Don this evening. Everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda. Is there any additions or deletions?
Rotary Tour donation.
Oh, okay. Anything else? Can I get a vote on that? Actually, I guess, motion and support, first of all. I'll make a motion.
Support.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
6-0. Great. Moving on to approval of meeting minutes. Our meeting minutes are from back in August. We did not have a formal meeting in September, so that's why we're approving them now. So has everyone had a chance to take a look at the meeting minutes? And is there any questions, comments, corrections?
Motion to approve is written.
Second.
Second motion.
Okay, thank you. Move on to open public comment. Seeing nobody here. We'll defer public comment to later if somebody does actually come to show up. Moving on to old business. I have a section set aside for the Lazy Ride, Glow Roll, and the upcoming Halloween parade. Jane, is there anything you'd like to report on these?
Started, we had 8 participants, which is cold but good and fun.
That's for the Lazy Ride, correct?
Lazy Ride last Saturday. And we're going to have one more next month. Bring coat next month.
Did your 8 include? Okay. Did your 8 include? The bicycle train?
I'm sorry. 11. That was 8, and it was 8, but we had 11 in between. That's right. Okay, Global. We did it September 30th. We had over 70 participants with the help of Bob and Brian, and I led the troop, and Brian Loftus joined us too, which was nice. And we're going to do it again next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Sharky, it's important to bring lights on the bike. If you don't have lights, you can't see. So, Global next week, Sharky, 7 p.m. Halloween parade. Anybody is welcome to participate. New this year, we're going to meet at 9 o'clock afternoon. If you want to do a little mini lazy ride back in the neighborhood, look at Halloween decorations before the parade to be worthwhile to bring a bike. And we're going to have a bike parade about 10:30, and Bob's going to lead us. But no. We're going to lead Bob. Bikes in the front, truck, and then trick-or-treater. And we're going to have our bike parked behind the VFW hall, just like last year, and go trick-or-treating. We're going to have fun again. And Mom and her friend are going to be dressed up as Find Out Yourself, and we're going to pass out literature. And I'm going to cut it, roll up, pass it out to the people on Halloween safety.
Okay. And I think we have extra glow bracelets and walk to school that will be passed out as well.
That too.
Is there a contest this year?
Not this time.
Okay. Questions or comments for Jane
on Glow Roll that's coming up with as many participants that we had last month? Will we be getting some type of escort, or are we on our own?
Escort? Oh yeah, you mentioned about escort. I can look into it and see if we can have one stand by. If we have more than 50, we can have police escort. If not, we're going to have to take care of our own group.
What question about that? Is there a cost associated with having a police escort?
No, there's not. But do keep in mind that the volunteers that come in the reserves are on their own time. So that's why they mandate 50 riders, because you're going to draw in 5 or 6 people to do that.
Another reason I'd kind of try shy away from doing an escort is we want to encourage people to be using the rules of the road. So if we are having a police escort, it's more like a parade, and so people are going to be encouraged basically to break the rules and not actually stop at stop signs or traffic lights. And I know we try to do that as least as possible just to keep everybody safe. Okay, moving on. Walk to School Day.
Walk to School Day was October 7th. You mentioned the leftover glow sticks and necklaces. Thanks to PAT for donating those, and they also provided a lot of volunteers because a lot of us work, or like I take my kids to preschool off island, so but we had 53 walkers at Meridian, according to Principal Solano. I'm not sure how many walkers we had at Park Lane. I counted, and it looked like we had handed out 63 glow sticks, but then Principal Solano said that they stopped handing them out. So that's not really an accurate reflection of how many walkers we had. So we had at least 63 walkers. I think Bob said that he saw 5 kids at the middle school. And
That's correct. That's from the south side coming up and around.
okay, and we did have the video contest, and I think we only had one video entered, which we were hoping to have a little bit more, 2-ish. It was kind of last minute notice. I had
It was just short notice.
it was
Next year would be
it
much
was very
better.
short notice. So do we think that we should start contacting people before school starts, right after school starts? I always run into that. I don't want to contact people in the summer because they're not even thinking about it, or they have other, the principals have bigger things to think about than Walk to School Day. And right after school starts can be hectic too, so I usually wait a few weeks to contact them, but it seems like the time I contact the superintendent and all the principals and get everyone's approval, it puts it, it buzzes right up with the date of Walk to School Day.
Mm-hmm.
Have we used Carly Hooper Young for anything yet?
No, but we should.
Yeah, probably should. We asked her to get involved with us, and then to not ask for that involvement is, deleterious to our effort. But she's a hard-working lady, and she's certainly in the right place to help.
I'd suggest that as well as potentially, going to the town, the school board, and letting them know about the successes that we've had. And see maybe if we can just get an ongoing commitment, save the date that, unless we hear otherwise, we're going to be planning ahead for these, and in October and in May. Yeah, in May for Bike to School Day. And I think that as we keep doing this routinely, it's going to grow each time.
Sure.
And I think with the videos, again, it was last minute. We might be able to approach maybe like the middle schools or the high schools again, and ask, is this something that they can do as part of a class project? And maybe it's an ongoing thing rather than having to have it done within a 2-week time period or whatever, when we actually start getting the word out about Walk to School Day or Bike to School. But and while we did get one in by time, I did, have my kids, submit another one, which this is all their own work. So if you guys don't mind, I'd like to play both of them right now.
I'd love to see it.
Jasmine sings Phoebe. How do you walk to school day? I can't wait. Where am I? It's important to use this crosswalk when I'll sing about it.
Don't cross the street in the middle of the block. Use your eyes to look up. Use your ears. Walk up to the corner when the coast is clear. And
So those videos were edited by our very own Jane Fiegel. So thank you very much for putting on the contest and putting your editing skills to work.
Well, you guys did the work. I just put it together. Thank you, committee.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about Walk to School Day? Okay, let's move on to bridge path maintenance. Well, I know you've been bird dogging this thing. Is there anything that you'd like to report to us
You know,
about?
I don't have anything to give you square feet or spots done versus spots not yet done, but boy, it's been happening all over the island. I'm very pleased with the new asphaltic emulsion top coating, and I think it looks good. It's not as reflective as the other stuff used to be, and it's supposed to be every bit as good. The bridges, stupendous. The bike paths have been sealed and repaired where necessary, and there'll be more next year. We have our work cut out for us for how to finance that next year. But what do you think? What is everybody else's opinion? It's going to be done this year, first time. That's great. But what do you think of the way it looks?
They match. I like how they match. They're all the same style and color. It's a collection like that.
Oh, the bridges, how they match?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the bridges are outstanding.
That's the best sealant they've ever seen. Mr. Pfeiffer is a artist with that stuff too.
I mean, the bridges seem much more stable. I actually shook the
ownership.
railings.
Pride of ownership, and we're the owners, us, the residents.
Bob, I know you've been riding around. What do you think of the path maintenance and the bridges?
They've done a wonderful job. I had a whole ride today, and the bridges look fresh. They look almost brand new, like they were just put up a year or so ago, and they've been there for a while. The bike paths where they've sealed it looks phenomenal, the way they've cleared the grass off and sealed over it. They're still finishing up on it, but right now, kudos to them. They're doing a fine job.
I think it's great that we're routinely doing this, and it's getting a little easier now that we're all up to speed on the different products that we could be using. I know I just recently attended a trail maintenance class, so there's some different aspects I'd like to potentially put to use, like edging the paths more often, because I guess that's one of the things that can actually maintain the life of the path more often, for a longer period of time. What was really interesting at this path maintenance workshop is they're saying that asphalt alone, if you put it down for a path and do nothing with it, you're maybe going to get 10 years out of your paths. And I know for a fact that Grozeal's been working on ours, and ours date back to the early 90s. So I mean, we're getting 20 plus years out of our paths. So I think that's a good return on investment.
There has been some places where those paths have just deteriorated past the point of no return, and then we've pulled them up and replaced them. But if we stick to our guns and continue to maintain them like we have last year and this year, this path will last a long time.
And the seal coat's going to be really important on that. I've been told that the new emulsion technology is great, and it's especially good if you put it on almost directly after, within like maximum maybe like a year after actually putting down your asphalt itself, and it's going to really extend life of the product. And I guess that there's two different products out there that we might be able to alternate between. One that's more of a black uniform coating that would make the paths match the old sections and the new sections. And then there's the ones that are more clear coat that go on as well. And those work good if we're going to be putting pavement markings on. So maybe as we move forward, it might make sense to alternate between the two of them based on what type of schedule we come up with for pavement markings and other maintenance activities.
Not quite sure as to how the two of them get along with each other. It's like painting with oil-based and then painting with water-based paints. And so that's probably worth looking at, Brian. I don't have a problem either way with that. But what the message I want to get out to our residents is that we're using a product that does not have polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are cancer causers. Say it 3 times fast? Go ahead.
Oh, I can't.
PAHs. They've been implicated as a known carcinogen. They do get carried off in runoff. They do get into sewers. They do affect aquatic life. And the aroma from freshly laid coal tar sealant is very dangerous. And that's proven. USGS has proven it. So I don't have a problem speaking out against it. And I wish people that are doing their personal driveways and walkways at homes go to the asphaltic emulsions rather than coal tar. It's not illegal to sell in Michigan yet, but many states from the East Coast coming this way have made them illegal.
Applaud this commission for thinking ahead and getting rid of the coal tars. So hopefully we never go back to them.
Amen. On my watch.
Okay.
While we're on that topic, did they mention anything about reflective edges? It'd be nice to see the edges at the path at night. Is there a way we could look into it in the future?
Are you talking about in the path maintenance workshop? Is that what you're saying? Did they mention it, or?
Well, on the path, maybe they think, oh, we have brand new tape or brand new paint that is reflective at night.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of clashes with our rustic hopes. We're trying to put a path down that doesn't glare like inner-city subdivisions,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Also, you have to remember, we have 9 miles of path. That's 18 miles of line.
2-inch brush.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add more to that, rather than if we were going to be looking at something like that, rather than doing edge lines, which makes it look more like a road, you might consider a center line that actually divides the traffic a little bit more. That way you don't have two surfaces. But again, keeping in mind that we do want to keep a little bit more rustic when possible, and additionally we don't want to take away from any of the areas that we really do need to call out. In a couple of minutes, I'll be talking about signages and intersections, and I think we want to make sure that where we do want to draw attention, really pops. And if we put down too much reflective tape everywhere, it's going to kind of mute the message.
Now, I'm thinking with the bike light, the only people who would see it would be the biker if they have lights. Like in Glovo, I didn't have a very good light, but I'm going to get better. It's kind of hard to see, but if they see the edges or the line, it would help them to see where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
My own, again, an issue that I have with stuff like that is this is a general law township. We get what we pay for. We ask the residents, what do you want? And if we go with too many bells and whistles, they may throw up their hands and say, that's too much, we're not going to pay for it.
Okay.
I'd rather be assured of first-class, solid, integral bike paths without jeopardizing it for bells and whistles.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. You're certainly entitled to your own opinion.
I guess the way I look at it is focus on the problem first of all, and then pick the solution, rather than saying this is a great solution. Let's find a problem for it. So with having edge lines might look pretty cool, but is it the least is there an easier way to accomplish what you're trying to get done with those edge lines with something that still meets the spirit of what our residents want?
If I say, I've seen in some communities, and instead of on the edges, they have single down the middle, and it's fluorescent and just one line instead of two, just down the center of the pathway. Something to think about in the future.
The other item could be where you do have those turns. If it's a sharp turn, a lot of times right now we do have some signs in certain sections, and we're hearing protests against having a lot of signs. Perhaps a pavement marking that shows the direction the path is going. There's a limited use of reflective tape that can show that the path is turning, but at the same time up in the air and not drawing too much attention. So these are all the things that we can think about in the future. So thanks, Jane, for bringing up the idea. I don't mean to be slamming it and discrediting it, but
No problem.
it's good to bring up. Okay, moving on to new business. Signage and intersections revisited. Several of us have completed our surveys. So I know Donna had said she had done hers, Bob had said that he'd done his, and I've got at least a good draft of mine ready to go. So I'm not sure, Bob, do you want to go first? Do you want to, or would you prefer me to?
It doesn't
to
matter.
lead?
Would you like me to point out a few things that I think that are
Sure.
special on the survey that I've done? The ones that I find to be using to the most pedestrians and cyclists and cars is stop signs at the lights, like at Grosse Hill Parkway and Macomb. You've got lights controlling the traffic, but yet we have stop signs there for bikes. Lights should control the flow of traffic, because even when you have the cross to allow you to cross, you have to stop even though you have a sign that tells you can cross. Eliminating them there, I think, would help a lot. And the same thing at Grosse Hill Parkway. You've got a large intersection there, which is controlled by lights, but yet we have stop signs on the bike path. When the tells us to go, we should be able to go. Ferry Road, that's a major crossing area. Pedestrians and cyclists, I would love to see cross blocks, across Meridian especially, to deem. People live here, we know this is a heavily traveled area by pedestrians and cyclists. And, cross blocks there, and also cross blocks at the major intersections of Macomb Parkway. There's a lot of things in every crossing at Laurie. I would like to see cross blocks there. I look at it as like the Idaho law. You've got a wide view of everything that's around you, and you have cross blocks. You should be able to roll on through the intersection.
We got questions for Bob.
Where do you get all your energy, Bob?
Oh, but thank you. Thank you, Wally. I appreciate that.
So, as mentioned in the past, we're charged with looking at the signs along the pathway. We each had different sections. My section, started with the path on the northern end by Voight and came all the way down to Ferry, and then I also did Horse Mill. So I started from what Aaron had done, which was great work, and expand scope a little bit to be looking at, first of all, what signs are not necessary, but also what signs could be put up in place if necessary, as well as other potential safety improvements. So starting over here, this is Voight and Meridian, and I've got a few different viewpoints of the different intersections. So one of the first things we see is these bike route signs. And as I mentioned before, a bike route sign is used to show that a certain street or path, something has an advantage over other routes. And it's supposed to get you from one place to another. So with our path along Meridian, it's pretty well known. And being that it is a path and we have signs up there, I'm wondering if that is a redundant measure to have a bike route sign on there, especially since it doesn't tell us much more information other than it's a bike route. Additionally, we have the path just sort of ending and dumping out into Voight, which is perfect from a bicycle standpoint. About if you're going northbound, you're able to transition and continue to go up Meridian or make a right turn onto Voight. But what the trouble is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Why we call these bike paths, they're actually shared use side paths or shared use paths in general. And so they're used by both bicyclists and pedestrians. And because they're used by pedestrians, it has to meet the needs of those that are disabled. So we have the ramps for the handicapped, but we also have to be able to work with those with disabilities and with sight issues. So generally, people that have low visibility, they use a cane to sound and they figure out where the edge of a curb is, and that way they know that they're entering the street. And they expect to be able to get across on the other side of the street. So in order to do that, when you get rid of the ramp, is you have to put in something called detectable warnings. And I'll have an image here in a minute that I'll show you. But essentially, it lets the person with low visibility know that when they walk over it, they feel a difference in the texture of the pavement, that they're going to be entering into the street. So they're expecting to have the same thing on the other side. So that's why some some places within our community as well as in others, you'll see a ramp on the other side of the street that basically doesn't go anywhere. But from an Americans with Disabilities standpoint, that's needed in order to let the pedestrian get safely out of the street. And it's something that we could be called out on in the future. So there's a way that we might be able to accomplish this with still having a ramp and meeting the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I'll get into that in a minute. So what I'll do is I'll go forward and show you in the upper right, the red square you see there, that is a detectable warning. And it's used at the base of the curb ramp as shown over on the left. And you see that there's an approach and a flares, which basically ramps down, they're the side walls of the ramp. And a person with a cane can sound the area and figure out exactly where they're supposed to be crossing within the street. And so that's what we should be having on all of our, on our path where it's crossing a street.
Brian,
Yes.
may I interrupt? I've heard that those can be slippery and kind of dangerous for skateboarders and rollerbladers.
I've not heard that.
I've heard it from skateboarders. I don't know that they've ever brought it up. I was just wondering if there's something that can be used as an alternative.
Unfortunately, no. Long story short, there's been lots of different materials that have been, experimented and used, and from the Americans with Disabilities Act standpoint, there's a specific type of detectable warning that needs to be used, and it has to have, the multiple dimensional aspects of it. And you can't do it with bricks like we have over on Macomb Street either. It's supposed to be this actual plastic plate. I can research a little bit more, but I think probably the bigger issue with the rollerblades and skateboarders is they just don't like that sensation when they're riding over the ramp, which I understand.
I've actually heard it's slippery and it can slip out from under, but
Yeah.
I don't skateboard myself, so I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen these because I work downtown like you do.
Mm-hmm.
In places of high-density pedestrian traffic, around places like hospitals, around places that cater to the needs of the visually impaired, I think they do make some sense. I see their failings. I see them damaged by snow plows and their tops ripped off, and that becomes a bigger hazard than the original device was intended to use. And frankly, on a bike path with low pedestrian density, especially at its ends, you'd have to work hard on me to convince me we need them.
I'm not trying to convince you. Like, this is not something that I personally want to see. This is something that the entire United States, FHWA, AASHTO, the American State and Transportation Highway officials, basically the consensus is behind this. And I'm letting us know about this because it could open us up for a lawsuit in the future. It's not something that we can, that we can choose to do. We actually are supposed to do it. So, I understand, Aaron, where you're coming from about the potential of being slippery. I understand, Wally, where you're coming from with the increased maintenance aspects. And, folks might say, well, there's less people, with visual impairments. We're not that dense. So there's probably not that many people. There might not be that much of a need. None of that matters when we're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act. And unfortunately, sometimes common sense goes out the window, but it's something that is part of the survey that I need to let folks know about.
Consider myself advised.
So as far as Voight and Meridian recommendations, a lot of these you'll be seeing repeated in the other intersections, but detectable warnings, crosswalk markings. We didn't have any in that area. As I mentioned, the receiving ramp on the opposite side. Is there a need for the stop sign at the end? I personally don't feel that there's a need, for that specific stop sign. I already mentioned about the bike route signs and that we potentially don't need those. One of the suggestions that I was thinking about was a bicycle off-ramp, and something that basically could meet our needs, and I'm not sure why this isn't going forward now. Oh, because... So You guys might be familiar with roundabouts and how, especially with multi-lane roundabouts, they potentially present an increased crossing hazard, I guess, for pedestrians and bicyclists. And people that are riding, bicyclists that are riding in the street, while they feel comfortable riding in a road segment, when they come to a multi-lane roundabout, they don't feel safe anymore. So something that's within the AASHTO guidebook, specifically, it's called a bicycle exit ramp. So what you can do is, if you're riding along the roadway, you can use this ramp to come up, and then at that point, act like a pedestrian. You're able to cross the street if you need to make the left to go on, or vice versa. If you go to the other side of the roundabout, you can use basically an entrance ramp, or it's a bike ramp. The major difference between this, and I know, well, you're going to say, well, oh, no, you're going to say this, but say, what difference
You can
between
probably
this?
bet on it.
What's the difference between this and the ramp for the pedestrian? Notice in detail A, and notice where these detectable warnings are. They're up at the top of the actual ramp. And from what I've been, this is, AASHTO, guidelines. This is what they specifically recommend, that if somebody is using a cane, they are able to detect that over there. They feel that, but then if they did go on the concrete past that, they're supposed to know that that is not a crosswalk. So there's no confusion in that aspect. And it's not in specifically the, I guess, a 90-degree angle, from the actual intersection. So we could, figure out an engineering solution that meets the spirit of something like this.
I don't want to cut you off.
Sure.
I want to know where you think this is applicable in Grosse Hill.
Again, what I was trying to talk about was the ramp itself, as opposed to the roundabout aspect, because I'm not going that way.
I'll leave my question on the board.
Okay. Again, at the northern end where our paths end, if we're able to provide a ramp so folks can get down into the street, but yet still, is not confused as a pedestrian crossing, we won't have to have that receiving ramp on the other end of the sidewalk. So this could be applicable at Meridian and Voight. It could be applicable at Horse Mill and Park Lane. It could be applicable at some other areas if we have paths that end. So the other items that I'd mentioned within the recommendations was, rather than having a bike route sign that has the arrows, which is supposed to be for the bicyclists, but is basically centered on road traffic, you get rid of the route sign, and we take our signs that have the bicycle, and you change it with this so that it always has a bicycle and a pedestrian. You call it a trail crossing. This is the only sign that I think that we need, and we already have a very similar sign up there already. So we can get rid of the route sign in general. I also mentioned about crosswalk markings. These are some of the potential options that we could use in certain locations. And then at key locations where it might make sense to provide some sort of wayfinding signage, we could use that to let bicyclists know that are coming from off island that might not be familiar, this is the way to downtown, or this is the way to the airport. We already have some of those signs for motor vehicles. These could be double duty, using for motor vehicles as well as for bicyclists or pedestrians. And I'm not suggesting that we put these everywhere, but it's just something that we might want to consider in some locations. So another item that I found throughout the segment is that we have our path, which is supposed to be contiguous, and it's divided up by driveways. And there are twofold reason why I don't think that this is the preferred way for us to continue going. One is because the aesthetics. If you're looking down the pathway, you're seeing a divided path, and I just don't think that it looks that great. But the second and more important thing is the path is the thing that needs continuous motion. When you're a driveway, when you're a driver in your driveway, you yield to traffic. You'll yield motor vehicle traffic. You wait for it to pass. It's the same thing when you're on the path. If this path is our priority within the region, this is our major route for bicyclists, I think that having the path continue over the driveway is the proper message. and this is not something that I'm suggesting that we go in and rip out, but residents come to our township for permits for driveways in the future, it'd be something that we'd try to get in the front end and provide good design, good design best practices.
Had that bike path been made out of a concrete rather than asphalt, where would the problem be?
Had it been with the concrete.
If that bike path was made out of concrete rather than of asphalt, where would this problem be? I think this is a non-problem, Brian. It's just a different color. The bike, typically the bike paths went in after the houses were built, the driveways were built.
Oh, yeah.
So they have some eminent domain there too. So kind enough to not get really upset with us when we are crossing their driveway, even though it's in the public thoroughfare. Mm-hmm. The realistic solution for this is not to try to make everybody cut a slit out of their driveway and repave it. It's already there.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that there's examples that there's parcels along Meridian where there aren't driveways yet, or there's an area where there's an old driveway that is going to be redone. At that time, that's when it would be triggered that you try to basically promote that the path actually has the right of way, that the path is contiguous moving forward.
I suggest that we table that discussion to a study session outside of the purview of this meeting.
Excellent. So moving south, Bridge and Meridian, if we're looking eastbound on the road, lower left, you can see the bike route sign. This is where, the bicycle sign. This is where I'm suggesting that we actually have a trail crossing sign because it's essentially what it is. And this isn't something that you rip up right away, but moving in the future when that sign has to be replaced, it might be applicable to do that because this symbol itself isn't really letting us know of much except for expected bicyclists. But we do know that there's a path up ahead, and we could get rid of this bike route sign over here, this arrow, and that was my major concern in this area, aside from I also thought would be a good idea since there's a lot of bicyclists that are traveling westbound towards the toll bridge that you might put in shared lane markings or sharrows on Bridge Road heading towards the toll bridge. Yes, Bob.
I can say something on the bicycle sign there. I take a bicycle sign as being bicycle or cyclists on the road. If I wasn't from Grosser or lived here, that's how I would take that. I wouldn't expect a bicycle path being there. Mm-hmm. When I see them on a highway, I figure there's cyclists on the highway, not on a bike path.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to put trail crossing, then that would put in my mind that there is a bike path here and there just isn't cyclists on the road. I can understand a trail crossing. That denotes that there is a bicyclist or a pedestrian trail here. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good call on that sign.
Yeah.
And I'm against signs. Thank you.
No problem. Other signs I thought I'd get rid of is the no motor vehicle signs. Within the guidebook, they say that you can put those up if you have issues with motor vehicles using your path. I'm not sure that we do have that problem to begin with, but if we do, there's other things that we could utilize. One of those is basically providing a median within the path that divides it up into two smaller sections, so that way it clearly shows that it's not the width of a vehicle lane. So this is an example of those. In this case, we got a little bit wider area because this is more of a 12-foot lane, but this is I just wanted to get you a picture for the spirit of what I'm talking about. Basically, you have some sort of obstruction in the middle that clearly shows that this is two smaller paths. You put in some tall grasses in that area. So again, you visually know that there's no motor vehicles in this area, and we could potentially take down that no motor vehicle sign. I mentioned before about shared lane markings. This is an example of shared lane marking in the city of Ferndale on 9 Mile. So moving farther down the road, come to the mid-block crossing of Meridian north of Horse Mill Road. So we can see in the upper left, we have a bicycle ahead sign that's advanced warning, and then we have the sign a little bit closer up that has the arrow pointing down. Again, Bob, as you're saying, it shows that there could be bicycles, but it doesn't let you know there is a trail crossing. Additionally, when we look over at the path itself, this is an area, Jane, where you're talking about that, well, the path actually turns. In many cases, in the newer parts of a path, like example, on Horse Mill Road, we've put up a sign that actually shows that the path turns to the right. I'm not suggesting that. I was thinking that potentially having some sort of landscaping in the area, that if you have a headlight, you're going into the grass, and so you actually visually know that you're supposed to be turning right in that location. So some of the things I was specifically recommending, again, the detectable warnings. In this case, I think high visibility crosswalk marking is needed. So Bob, we talked about, the big blocks, you call them cross blocks. I think that's definitely needed in this location because we're crossing the road. As we saw in these images, this is daytime. You can barely see that crosswalk at all.
Exactly.
At night, I can't see it all. And we know that there are people out there riding, and since this is mid-block away from the intersections, a lot of motorists aren't, if they're not from the area, but if they're distracted as well, they're not going to be expecting somebody crossing in this location.
Absolutely, cross blocks. Give everybody that's listening and watching, give you an example on Macomb, PNC Bank, there's cross blocks there. We notice those cross blocks and that crossing long before we get to it. And I'm pro cross blocks on Meridian for pedestrians and cyclists and motorists as well.
So again, I think we could take down the no motor vehicle signs. One thing that I'd like to see in this location is potentially be having a little bit more of an apron of a paved surface near the crosswalk, because you can see that the gravel over here, and it's less attractive, and it could potentially cause a safety concern with bicyclists, with thin tires, with rollerbladers, with skateboarders. It's just something that in the future, if we have a little bit, it would be nice to clean it up. The other thing that I was mentioning, I thought would be good, if you drive through some communities, they've been putting up the pedestrian, the bicycle signs. Instead of being that more darker orange, they're going with more of a bright fluorescent yellow. And those show up dramatically more. And so moving forward, that's what a lot of communities are doing. I'd recommend that potentially we use those. I tried to get them in for the Horse Mill path, and our consultant at that time said, well, we've already got the more amber orange signs within the corridor, so we're going to go with those for consistency's sake. Not an engineer, and I understand the consistency aspect, so I didn't fight the issue. But I think moving forward, this would be a way that we could really make those the crossings where people are most in danger really pop. The other item is, depending on the level of traffic, depending on what we want to do. I'm not specifically recommending it. I'm just saying that this is a potential option. It's something called rectangular rapid flashing beacon. And this is what a rectangular rapid flashing beacon looks like. You can see the bright, yellow green sign to begin with. It's got the arrows pointing down. What makes this different, you see this little rectangle between the arrow board and the pedestrian sign. That's actually a light that when a pedestrian pushes it or a bicyclist pushes it, it lights up. And it's more like a railroad sign that it's got like a wig-wag. It goes back and forth. And so it's really bright, and it lets motorists know that somebody's going to be crossing this. But it's not on all the time. It's only when somebody pushes it. So it's something. And again, I'm not saying we need it. I just want to know that it's a tool in our arsenal, that if we find that we are having some compliance issues, or we have safety issues, specifically forbid somebody gets injured in this area, this might be something that we could look at for mid-block locations. And the other item I was going to suggest was on this graphic here. You can see that on the path itself, looking at the lower sign, it says road crossing ahead. That's, an example of a pavement marking that we could alert folks to know that, you are going to be entering into an intersection, but we don't actually need a stop sign. So not in this case, because, I think when you're crossing mid-block in the middle of the road, I think that you do need to stop. But in certain cases, we might be able to get away with just a pavement marking instead of having, a stop sign or a yield sign. So moving farther south, the Horse Mill Meridian, we have the bike route signs. Looking in the lower right corner, you can see that we actually have a green arrow sign for the green bike route sign, but with a mismatched blue sign, which basically this is it doesn't work. It's not standard to begin with, let alone what does the bike route sign actually need? Why does it need to be there? Additionally, we have some curve signs which don't need to be there because there's barely a curve at all. We have a T intersection sign, like in this guy's front yard, which I would not be happy if that went up in front of my yard. And I think that's something that we could get away with. Again, some sort of vegetation that was a little bit lower profile that let folks know that, yeah, you're supposed to make a right turn or a left turn. And there's actually other signs that conflict in this area, saying that you could only turn right. So at this intersection, is saying that, again, about the detectable warnings, potentially high visibility crosswalk markings. We're going over a major road. It's not needed, but it would be highly recommended. And I think that the bicycles do need to stop in this location. You need to be able to make a complete stop, scan the road, left, right, left again, like my kid's video showed. So that way we know you actually have it safe to cross. So the suggestions are very similar to what I've mentioned before. Moving on to the Horse Mill Path. I think this is an issue that we all agree on. I know that our former Commissioner Rob, this is his big pet peeve, was the bike route end signs. Again, if we're getting rid of the bike route signs, this is pretty much a moot point. But these two on the eastbound side Horse Mill, you go going eastbound, but on the west side of thoroughfare. So we've got about a mile before the route, before the path ends, and we've got these route signs, 2 of them already within this segment. They're just not needed. Moving a little bit farther east, we have the similar signs again. And one thing that I want to show you with these arrows is we have a pedestrian crossing, and I'll show you an image of that closer up. But basically, we have people that I'm guessing are either crossing the street, crossing Horse Mill mid-block, or they're pulling up in their cars, but there's a pad, a sidewalk, and an actual sidewalk that's crosses our path and leads to one of the open space trails. That would be something that I think a bicyclist would want to know, because we've got this blind turn coming up, and you want to be going a little bit slower so that way you don't have a pedestrian and bicycle collision. Farther down the path, closer to where we get to Park Lane, again, we have one of these, arrow signs saying that the path, makes a turn, and it's so minute that there's no safety concern whatsoever. I just think it's a sign that's needed. And then finally, we have our route end sign. So other segments, closer back to thoroughfare, this was something that I had, struggled with, because we have this grassy path, grassy patch between the road and the sidewalk. And when you're trying to ride your bike in this area, especially if you have a bicycle trailer, it's very hard to navigate the sidewalk. And I could kind of understand, I could get where they're coming from. They're saying, well, you do want to have that delineation, or maybe you don't want to have, the concrete up against the asphalt. I'm not sure, and again, I'm not an engineer, but I was just trying to figure out reasons why they wouldn't do that. But there are other locations, again, where we have that sidewalk with the going to the trail, where we do have concrete and asphalt put right together. So I'd recommend that we actually fill that in the future. We also have these must-walk bike signs on either end of the thoroughfare bridge. This was a requirement from Wayne County, and I understand their safety concern. They're afraid that if people are riding their bike on this bridge, when you get over here, that they're much higher and they could topple over. So from a liability standpoint, they want people to walk their bikes. But I'm thinking that, again, we could have some sort of pavement marking that says the same thing, and we can get rid of, 2 signs, which, I don't know, they light up to me. I just don't think that they're needed, and they go against that rustic nature of what we're trying to accomplish with the path system. So this is, a look of the same bridge area eastbound. So you've got the asphalt actually coming right up against the asphalt of the roadway, and we've got a much wider shoulder of this bridge over here. So it just, to me, it seems like common sense that we should fill this in, so that way if you're riding your bicycle, if you got a bicycle trailer, if you got wider load or something, or you're just for whatever reason, you have a little bit more room to negotiate and try and get onto this bridge shoulder.
Especially if someone's coming towards you.
Yeah.
It should be as wide as the sidewalk is on the bridge.
Yeah.
It should be consistent for a consistent flow of traffic, like you're saying, for a trailer and a bicycle coming the other way. But for pro, the reason I would think to fill it in is because you would stop water from going under the sidewalk and under the pavement, and in the wintertime, freezing and heating and cracking the sidewalk and the pavement. So if you paved it or cemented it over, you'd eliminate that problem of maintenance.
The bridge was put in long before that bike path was there, and part of the Wayne County dictates at that time, which they were capable to do because they had money, we didn't. They're the ones that dictated the particular configuration of that sidewalk. I remember this very well. But yeah, we're going to maintain it. The next time we do some maintenance on the bike path, let's scoop it out and fill it up with asphalt and be done with it. Rather apologize than beg.
So this is another image talking about what I was telling you before. So we have this sidewalk that's for the pedestrians, so that way they can access this wonderful trail that Wally and Cliff and all of our open space friends help maintain. And it does cross our path. So I think that it might be nice to have some sort of warning that you might be expecting a pedestrian in this area. It's not needed.
Cliff would explain that is that your bike path crosses his trail. There is there's an intersection there.
Yeah.
I don't see this being the Brooklyn Bridge at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
All right, so, what
Some of these are just
some of
good
those
to
are
know.
nice to have,
Some of these are
some nice to know. And you know me, I'd like to take them all down if I could.
Yeah.
And if they disappear, you're not going to see me voting to replace them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'm not saying anything more than that.
Okay. So also in this shot, notice the arrow sign. They're actually,
It's reversed.
yeah. This is something that I know, it was Rob's pet peeve. And I caught it. It's like, I think that it's actually maybe it should have been farther up on the trail, farther downstream. But either way,
Sending you on the road.
yeah, it's the wrong sign. We either put up something that's correct, or
it down.
it goes down. It
Take it
goes
down.
missing.
It's incorrect. Take
Yeah.
it down. Somebody's going to swerve in front of a vehicle there. That's the justification. Because
Okay.
we don't have enough sense to look at the road, right? We ride by sign.
Yeah.
Let's take it down and eliminate that confusion.
Great. You can also see those must walk bike signs again, but that's the reverse side. And there's another bike route sign, which I think can come down. So this is just an aerial viewpoint. I think we've cleared the air on it. Unless there's any other questions, I'll move on. Nothing new. Horse mill and thoroughfare. This is another area where I was saying that the bike route signs could come down. If you look at the northbound sign right down here in the lower left, we've got the bike route sign, the arrow, that's blocking our actual more legal sign saying that there is a bicycle crossing over here. I think this sign could definitely come down. Again, in the future, maybe we have this bicycle sign be an actual trail crossing. And anytime that we do have these trail crossings, if we think it's important, one thing I'd love to see is that we say the name of the trail. do we call it the Meridian Path? Do we call it the Neidhart Memorial System? I'm not saying, suggesting what we actually call it, but more successful communities, when they're branding their stuff, they're actually giving these things names. And so when you're in a motor vehicle driving down the road, they say, hey, I just came across the Meridian Path or the Horsemill Path or whatever we want to call it. But it's something that sticks in your mind. It's the same way when we're riding down the freeway, we go over a river, we have an actual river crossing, it actually says the name of the river. It's just something that's, adds a little bit more value. And if we're going to be putting up a sign in that location anyways, I think we could get away with actually putting out any more actual signed real estate and still have that information added. Nothing new. Horsemill and Park Lane. Basically, this is where I was saying about another potential bicycle exit ramp. I think that we did good by putting in the wood chips over here, so that way at least we're keeping it less muddy and letting people actually exit the street, into the street. But moving into the future, when we have a chance, I think that we need to do something about getting people to this road and getting people to this church. So originally, when we were moving forward with this project, this was my recommendation to Rains Engineering. It was to have a crosswalk, on the western side of the intersection that would go to the church, and we were hoping to have partnership with the church, so that way, if they wanted to provide a little sidewalk that goes right up to their doors, they could do that. But our path actually goes to something, ends somewhere, as well as we could have a bike ramp, like I said, so that way, folks could go to Park Lane, or they could carry on to East River. So with Highland, Whitehall, and Biomar, it's pretty much the same stuff I've been talking about before. Detectable warnings, advanced signage, get rid of the route signs, potentially, get rid of the stop bars. Again, if we're not asking people to stop at these, because we know they're not, we can get rid of them. We could potentially put in yield bars if we were asking people to actually, yield at these locations. Church and Meridian, looks like there needs to be a little bit of maintenance on some of the signs. I think the biggest thing, the elephant in the room is, it'd be nice in the future to actually have, some sort of crossing and have that, sidewalk go all the way down to thoroughfare where it connects in with the rest of our, high-density residential areas. But in the meantime, there's two options that we have for getting people on the east side of the thoroughfare canal to our path system. So the first one is the Anderson Cut. Wally, I know you know all about this, but for our folks at home that don't know, the Anderson Cut is an actual existing pathway, a soft trail that connects the two parts of Anderson Road between Meridian and thoroughfare. So folks can use the sidewalks on Church Road, make a left onto thoroughfare, come downstream, and actually exit, come in and go through this pathway, and then have a clear shot to cross Meridian with good sight distance issues away from this intersection that actually has, high through volumes, but also high proportion of right turning, left turning vehicles in multiple directions. So, lower left corner, you can see that we do have this pathway. It's really nice. I use it quite a bit, and we do have that clear shot. So in the short term, there's nothing that needs to be done. And I say that needs. Again, from a safety standpoint, do we have to do anything? No, we don't. And there's nothing that's not needed because we don't have any signage there. But as far as suggestions, I would highly recommend that we get together with our friends in the police force and examine the suitability of an actual mid-block crossing at this location. So I'm talking about is further up Anderson, where it meets with Meridian, get a police presence there and say, confirm that yes, this is a good spot for people to be crossing. And if so, let's put out some sort of signage and fix up this Anderson Cut, through some bike route or wayfinding signage. So that way people know that this is the way we're promoting people to be, accessing Church Road. And if we do that, I would suggest that we make it a little bit wider, so that way you can promote, two-way traffic, or at least get a bicycle trailer through there. The other option is a little farther south, is thoroughfare again. And our good friend Eric Ranka, this was his baby that he liked to use, and I use both Anderson and the thoroughfare crossing. So if we didn't, if we made that left turn from Church Road onto thoroughfare, but didn't use the Anderson cut, we'd end up coming down here, and we could make the right turn. We'd have another pretty clear shot across Meridian in order to access the path. My personal opinion is that. What's that? My personal opinion is I think Anderson has a little bit more of a visibility. I think that, your visibility is a little bit more limited in this location, and there is some issues with gravel and debris in this location. But I do see a lot more people using this, and so I'm not sure what the answer is. Do we use both, or do we choose one or the other, thoroughfare or Anderson? But I think that both are potentially viable through a combination of some pavement markings and some wave signage to get to Church Road. Bob, I think you were going to comment.
On this one here, Anderson Cut, just recently I've taken some long-term, or people who lived on this island for quite a while, and took them down the Anderson Cut, and they both said to me, I never knew this was here. So a lot of people aren't aware of the Anderson Cut, because if you go by it on thoroughfare or Meridian, you look down, you think it's completely closed. You literally have to go to it to actually see a 3-foot wide walkway down to Church from to thoroughfare from Meridian. So I think a lot of people aren't aware of this crossing. But you're absolutely right. The visibility northbound, southbound at the Anderson Cut at Anderson and Meridian is far greater than the crossing at thoroughfare and Meridian because of the curve and vegetation. And sure, we could cut the vegetation down, but the traffic, I think the speeds coming around the curve, they're upon you before you know it. So there's a lot to consider here at the Anderson Cut.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Well, is there anything that you'd like to add about the Anderson Cut?
Nothing that I haven't said for 12 years.
Okay, sir. I guess the only thing I will add is that I'd like to make sure that our friends that live on the Anderson Cut are aware that we might be considering this, so that way they are not blindsided by it. I know that when we had our island-wide garage sale, I went to a few homes on Anderson, and I asked them about it. Well, first of all, did they know about it? And they said, oh, yeah, we did know about it. And so I asked them, what would they think about us making it a little bit more official? And the one person that I talked to had a little bit of resistance. She thought I was talking about opening up for motor vehicles. And I said, no, by no means am I suggesting that.
We've never suggested that.
So I think that people will be amenable as long as we let them know that this is going to be very context sensitive, and it's not going to change the dynamics of that nice street. The other option with thoroughfare, and I didn't know if it made much sense at all, but if we do see that people are going to continue to use this, is it possible to utilize this this area a little bit more and actually have a path connection that potentially could give you a little bit more visibility and provide a connection to the Meridian path. But I leave that up to further studies to take a look at. So the last area is Ferry Street, and Bob, I know you talked about this already. So there's a few issues with this. The first one is that our sidewalks, our path goes down to a sidewalk, and I'm pretty sure that this is probably another time when Wayne County had money and sort of dictated what they were going to do, or potentially there is some issues with right-of-way. But I think at this particular location, it serves as a real negative aspect of our path and potentially a safety concern, because we have a lot of traffic in this area to begin with. So people are crossing each other, and they have to signal and communicate with each other to let who's going first, because it effectively acts as a one-way. The good plus is that this is an area where we do have our detectable warnings, like we're supposed to. But the other item that I wanted to mention was that we do have this part of the path that continues on straight and just ends. And I'm not sure if the plan was, maybe at some point, this was the terminus of one of the phases of the paths. And so that's why it's sort of dumped out over here. And then later this was added in. But, I question, do we need this movement? And if we do need it, is there a way that we can, limit it or make sure that folks understand that this is the preferred move that we want people to be doing? So this might be a location where, you put a bike ramp in at some point, narrow this down so people, if they want to travel in the road and, ride with traffic, it promotes that. It provides that sort of connection, but people do understand that this is not a continuation of the path. And the last item for this area, and last item that I have to talk about tonight, is potentially what what Bob was talking about with increasing this area and providing basically a queuing station, because we have so many folks trying to cross this area. And Bob, maybe you want to add a little bit more to that now that you have some visuals to talk about it.
Like you were
else in case you want to point.
Well, as you were saying, I believe Wayne County, when they did these sidewalks, and they are kind of one way for, well, pedestrians, two way, but cyclists is definitely one way. And I find lots of times if I'm on one side of the street, we wave to each other who can cross or whatever, because lots of times we end up across the street here and we've got a gathering, and it's so sharp of a turn the way the grass is, and that some people almost tumble over, and little kids on their training wheels tumble over in the grass. I myself, I would like to see this little grass area here removed, not remove the curb itself, because if we did that, cars and vehicles would probably cross over into the area, but just the grass, remove it, and either have it blacktopped in or cemented, and it could be a waiting area or staging area before crossing, because otherwise these sidewalks, these three, they narrow down to where it's hard for two bikes to pass each other safely. And then we got to take into consideration, as we're trying to get by one another, now we've got to cross a road. And this is also, like I said before, this is a highly traveled area. I'd like to see cross blocks across Meridian and Ferry both. It's nice that we have a flashing light, but cross blocks and widening these sidewalks make it less congested, because it does get congested over there at times. And that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you, sir. So that's the end of my presentation over here, and I apologize that went on in length, but I wanted to show you how I was kind of thinking that we could have the gritty details about our path system, about the good, the bad, the ugly, and use this as the starting block to create a long-term plan for providing maintenance and enhancements. So, this can serve, feed right into a non-motorized plan for the island. So if you guys like this sort of format, potentially, when we go out and do surveys in the future, we could have, something similar.
Cover a lot that I didn't realize. Oh yeah, like the grass by the bridge. I didn't even notice it. But good point. It'd be confusing.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Telling me to shut up, it'd be fine.
No, I don't think we should do that. But what we should do is we should incorporate this sort of a study as we do a rehabilitation or repair on a section of bike path. Let's get it fixed.
Great. Thank you, Wally. The next item on our agenda is the review of the 2015-2016 objectives. And since my presentation went a bit long and we're approaching 9 o'clock and I have a few other items that we want to get to, I would like to make a motion to table this until our next session.
No objection to that.
Second motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Motion passes. Okay, next item is literature distribution at welcome centers. I turn the floor over to Bob and Jane.
I just recently was down at the Welcome Center, and I went down there to pick up some literature to bring back to the township, but I come across a young lady who lives across the way in Gibraltar, and she looks out her window every morning at Grosse Hill. And I told her, that I had belonged to BPAC, and she looked at me and said, in her own words, she said, she was surprised that we, as much as we have to offer here, that we don't have any literature in any of the welcome centers. And she proceeded to tell me about the procedures of how to go about this. So I brought this back, policy guidelines for literature distribution at welcome centers, and there's 14 welcome centers in the state of Michigan. And how it's done, the time procedure, and names of people to call. And I'm hoping that all the organizations and the committees that are on this island, if we can all get together and talk about a flyer to put at the welcome centers, telling people about the things that we have going on here on Grosse Ile. And we do have a lot of things that we do. Basically, I've tried to mention the Tour de Ile, the Glow Roll, the Lazy Rides, Island Fest, Greenways, open spaces, the pilot houses, the bed and breakfasts, our recreation department, which is phenomenal, the NAS base. And these are all committees and organizations that, according to the Welcome Center, we could have maybe a flyer to, to present to the state for review. And, well, before it even gets there, all the organizations and committees, we could get something going and present something to our township and see what everybody thinks about this. Jane, you did a wonderful job on a little flyer.
Yeah, it was just a rough draft, and you told me about it after Lazy Ride. I found time in between everything else, just a rough draft, and Brian did mention there's another commission that could do that. Is it still active, or the communication commission, are they still active?
There is no more communication.
Okay, so it falls on my lap.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to fall in your lap.
Oh, I love it.
There is a recognition that we don't have enough publicity about Grosse Ile and its very, very many attractions. We don't have a Disney World. We have a natural world. And many people appreciate that natural world, but unfortunately, up to this point, nobody has taken it on, frankly, like you have. And let me see where I can take this in the township and show it off a little bit. All of these folks are living in silos. The Recreation Commission has channels, and it's all about recreation. DPS has a promotion right now about fixing our roads and water. Another silo. Greenways and Open Space has a 16-page brochure. We all are, I think, ignoring the fact that the others exist. And what Jane has hit on is a way to tie it all together. Mm-hmm. There's only one way to get that to happen, and that's to make the folks that are the heads of those commissions and committees get together. So she's on the right track. I will help you.
I would love that. So I would love to set up a study session, and I can have one or two, and hoping Donna, if she's available, we can get together, like you can make call.
Let me pass it through the business manager and see if we can come up with a communication that points out this opportunity. Bob, you did a great job on this, really seriously. My herd of wild cats always comes up with feral cats, pardon me.
Well, thank you, Wally. I was really surprised.
Always comes up with something that's unique and unusual and full of energy and right.
I really think we can get Grosse Ile out there if we choose to. Absolutely.
I will take it up with Township Manager. I will take it up with a communication to every one of the commission chairs. I have talked about collaborating between, and it hasn't happened. So I guess we got a bigger herd of cats.
Yeah, one more thing in the mix there. In the past, I've talked about an online dynamic, very similar to what this brochure is trying to accomplish, but basically a portal for folks that are in the cyber world and learning about information about Michigan, potentially coming from the state's website and the Iron Bell, which is the trail that goes from the UP down to Detroit and comes through Grosse Ile as well. There's dynamic aspects that where they're looking for a web address to connect folks in. And I wanted it to be, again, more people-centric, more branding, selling, grow zeal, from the different aspects that a tourist might have. So our paths, but our open space, our kayaking opportunities, the various things that our Recreation Commission is doing. So very similar to what Jane is accomplishing. And I'd like to have that potentially looked in the mix too. And again, I don't want to say that BPAC has to do it. It's just something that I think would be good for all of us to get together and have a common message.
We have a bike pass system that is and should be the envy of a lot of communities, number one. Number two, just think about the opportunity to go to the end of Grosseal Parkway, walk down a flight of stairs, and stick your feet in the water and look across the water and see what the Potawatomi saw 200 years ago. Unchanged. How many communities do you know have an alpaca farm? How many things do we have unusual here? There's other people like that stuff besides us. Mm-hmm. Let's go for it. I will work on it.
Thank you, sir.
So once you get the approval, let us know, and I get the ball running with the team.
Will do.
Great.
Excellent.
One other thing, if I may, at the Welcome Center, I also have an application that I haven't shown to anybody, but they also have a application for events. If you chose to, or one of our committees or organizations wanted to set up a table at the Welcome Center, you apply for it, for how many hours, and what you're going to show, whether it be for Grosse Ile, for Tour de Ile, for BPAC. There's also an application for that during holiday travel. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Last item on the agenda is the Tour de Ile donation. Jane, you have the floor.
Okay, I was invited to go to the Rotary meeting last month, and John took me aside and he was talking. They raised over $17,000 for the Tour de Ile, and John wanted to contribute something to BPAC. And he suggested maybe a drinking fountain. I suggested a donation of couple bikes for Alan's idea of renting bike that we can put on the table and see what we can do with the donation. I'm not sure on the dollar amount, but let's throw in some ideas so I can get together with John.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you get an idea of specifically what they are interested in donating, either in concept or in dollars?
Yeah. Ask them if they're interested in donating to programs, because I think that like walk to school, bike to school, or Halloween rides.
Well, let me take it a little further than that, Brian. This is not going to be inexpensive. Perhaps they could be sponsors of it, Mm-hmm. Those are, and Rotary's good at stuff like that.
Yeah.
Planting a seed.
Only thing I'd caution us against is the bike rental or bike sharing, because again, we're all pretty busy. I'm not sure who would be the one that's going to actually administer the system. And again, what happens if if a bike did turn up missing? I'd hate to go to the Rotary Club and let them know that, hey, the bike that you gave to us is in the river, or we don't know where it is.
Well, actually, Alan gave me an idea about possible bike rental. And I was thinking, since you have jobs, you have families and stuff, and I have the time, I was thinking maybe Bob and I could maybe have the key to the shed, text us and say, hey, I want to rent a bike. I'm home. Okay, I'll meet you at the airport, give you the key. When you finish, lock it up by a tree, and I'll come by later and put the bike away. It's possible, but...
It's possible.
Yeah. If you're gung-ho about it, sell us a little more on it.
I would have to suggest, I had thought about this instead of using new bikes. How about finally refurbished used bikes? In case something
I
happens
have a couple
to
bikes to donate.
There you go. See, I have a couple I can donate. As long as they're safety and road ready, for $20 a day they can have it.
So, I get back to John, what do you recommend?
I think
He
Wally
wants me to write
made it.
a business proposal, letter, recommendations, or what can you recommend?
Well, I think that Wally hit the nail on the head and ask the Rotary Club, what ideas do they have that they'd like to potentially fund? What are they interested in? So, they mentioned a fountain. You mentioned the bike rental, but what about, a donation for programs? So, like about the different events that we're doing or the brochure. And you just throw out a couple ideas and say, what would they like? What were they thinking?
Okay, how about this? Why do I make a list of suggestions to run to our education? This is what we would like. You pick what you want.
Why don't you let them make that list of suggestions instead of us? They might come up with better ideas and perhaps nicer ideas than even we would hope for. And there's an old saying: "You got the money, honey. I got the time." Let's figure out how we're going to.
Awkward.
I said that.
Right.
I'll say it again if you didn't hear me. But the point is that they're the ones making the offer. Mm-hmm. Let's listen to what they have to offer. That's all I want to do.
Mm-hmm. I think that Jane said that they want our ideas, right? Am I correct? That's
correct. Rather they suggest a water fountain, I'm thinking.
Well, let him know how much it costs to do a fountain. So that, like $12,000.
I know. I don't think they wanted to donate $12,000.
Yeah,
no.
so just let them know about that.
Fountain. So maybe a good idea, I could give them a list of ideas, let them pick what they want.
Yeah, just don't put too much effort into the list. Just give them ideas, and if they gravitate towards something, then we can put an effort towards making a solid business plan for what we would want to do.
Yeah, so I come up with something, I send you an email.
Okay.
We go on from there.
Okay, moving into reports and closing. Any other upcoming rides or runs to publicize? Hearing none, move on. Wally, do you have anything you want to add for your liaisons report?
No, I think I've said enough.
So, next Monday is the last day of Slow Bowl. You could wear a costume, and they're going to have a party afterwards somewhere in Detroit.
Okay.
Go next Wednesday, back Halloween this Saturday, and one more lady ride, and I'm done for 2015.
Thank you.
Part-timer.
Yeah. And I have nothing for the chairman's report. So with that, can I get a motion for meeting adjournment?
Aye.
Second.
Wally, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Walk, bike, and drive safe.